Welcome to Inside Image, presented by Seismic Sound Off. I'm your host, Andrew Gary. On Monday, the SEG and AAPG Women's Network hosted an executive panel on high-impact technical leadership and decision-making in complex energy environments. After the panel, I continued the conversation with Patricia de Lugão and Allison Kennedy Thurmond. This is a true Inside Image episode, as the three of us built on what had just been shared on stage in real time. We get into when to say yes to leadership opportunities, how to make decisions without complete information, why asking the dumb question can expose hidden assumptions, and why Allison believes everyone should have a plan B and a plan C for their career. Even with the impromptu feel, there is a lot of practical, well-earned wisdom here. Let's join the discussion.
So thank you both for joining me. Something that really intrigued me from what you both were talking about and Marianne said. So Marianne shared this story from this panel about this time where her boss resigned and then she was offered a leadership position and she also resigned. You mentioned, Allie, several times where people kind of sought you out for leadership roles and you took them, and pretty young to start off. Patricia, you started your own business, like you took a big leap. What made you know that you were ready for that decision?
Well, like I said, I didn't know a lot of things. I just don't really think too much about it. It's just that I wanted to do it. I thought this is important. This is the time now, because it was like a new technology was coming out. It was my area of expertise, and then I felt, okay, this is the chance. So I jumped in, pretty much. And every time I'm called, like now for the SCG, would you like to be director at large? And I say yes. I like to contribute, and so I was always like this. I was always forward. I was never shy from anything that people asked me to do. I wouldn't have done what Marianne did.
That kind of makes me think, yes, the one thing that was said was by Ty, we all think differently. And you just said you would probably not do that. Are you kind of in that camp too? You would just say yes and figure it out as you go along?
I think so. And I think it's when people have confidence in you. So, I think to be able to get opportunities for somebody to say, hey, have you thought about applying for this position? Have you thought about these kinds of degrees? Yeah. You had to have demonstrated something. And I was actually having this conversation with my son, driving him home from the airport. And he said, I don't think I want to be a leader. And I said, you are leading. You're leading yourself. And I think when you do that and you demonstrate that, they see something in you. And then those opportunities come up. And, I just had a period in my life where it's like, I'm in my yes phase. I'm going to say yes to things. And those have worked out.
Yeah, that's a good point. Sometimes, maybe in Mariana's, we don't know the full details, but maybe sometimes you just feel like, oh, I'm here. So you're just asking me, but you don't believe in me. You're not like, I'm just like, I'm in the room. And you had people that said, I see things in you. You saw opportunities that other geoscientists and geophysicists weren't. So like there does seem to be a little more meat there. More signal to keep using the terminology.
You can be asked to do something that's actually maybe a step to the side or even a step down. So this always saying yes doesn't always work. I think you have to be quite intentional. And so if it's stretching you and you feel that you're ready for that stretch, then I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
One of the things that really intrigued me, kind of a minor tension, I feel like, in the two things you were sharing. You were talking a lot about how the knowledge, like being technically competent, is really what you look for most kind of in a leader or a manager, like someone who knows their stuff. And Allie, you were talking about how really when you're making a $2 billion decision, that's not always possible. You're bringing other people in. And it's just interesting to me to think of that, like you're running a pretty small business. You mentioned you have employees working with you, but you're pretty small. You're in a 23,000 employee. How did you kind of feel like you self-selected into the various roles of how you see leadership, or do you think your philosophy of leadership is kind of adjusted based on where you are putting yourself?
I think I might be able to help with, because I think in some ways we're saying the same thing, because for me to be able to do what I do, I need leaders like you. Like Patricia, I need to know that technical rigor and that technical leadership is there in each of those disciplines that are coming together to bring about a $2 billion decision. So that's quite important. For me, though, in the decisions we move forward, there isn't any way. I mean, I'm a geoscientist by training, but I'm not a drilling manager. I don't have a finance degree, so I can't go. I'm not a lawyer. I can't go and negotiate the offtake agreements. I can't go work, directly be the one managing all the bank details in terms of the financing. So I need to have people that have those skill sets around me, and I can't micromanage them. I can ask. What I do find is helpful. I can ask dumb questions. And I actually find
it's a classic interview technique as well.
Yeah, but asking the dumb questions is, I think, where then it allows them to really have to explain, and then we get to find out where the assumptions really are.
Yeah. Well, even for a small company like mine, I mean, I do have other people, because I'm not a geologist, I'm a geophysicist, right? So I have a geologist, so he's helping me also make decisions. Like when we design a project for a client, then he helps me because he's a geologist, so he knows the geology, and then I come in with the methods. Okay, I think this method will work in this environment, and then my husband, who is my financial, my other son who take care of the money, they say, oh no, this is too little, this is too much. Okay, this is how much we need for this project. So yes, of course you don't make the decision alone, okay? But and you do have resources. We do have resources. Allie has more resources than I do, but still you need resources, and you need to know how to work with them. To make people, and for me, this is something I would like to have said, is that when you work with people, you have to use what each person can give to you. Because that people are very different, and not everybody's going to give you the same. It's not going to work the same. It's not going to be the same. Some people are higher level than others. Still have to work with them. And you have to try to make this bell-shaped curve broaden. That's what I try to do. I try to educate, to help, to say, look, a mentor, so that, these people that are down here, they're a little bit more up on the curve.
One of the things that is, I think, a main thing you hear at Image is networking. It came up in this quite a bit. But I would imagine that idea of networking is very different if you're trying to be in like a big oil and gas company versus like starting your own business. Like the network I imagine that you would need for that, for going out on your own, starting a business, versus I'm going to stay in this oil and gas space and maybe transition. You're in lithium now, Allie, maybe it changes, but how do you just kind of do the same approach to networking, and just as your career goes, it'll work out? Or do you really target different things depending on what you think you want your career to go, as much as that is in your control in this space?
So what I could say is what I encourage, I do myself, but I encourage my mentees. You need a plan B and a plan C, right? Your plan B is if something happens, you walk into work and you find out you no longer work here today. Who are those 5 people you're going to put to work for you, and they're going to put their network to work for you to help you get up on your feet? And so it'll be a shock, but how long you're in that shock will vary based on how strong your network is. And so that's something you can't get that in the moment. You have to build that over time. Your plan C, so that's a reactive plan, plan B. Plan C is your proactive plan. Who am I going to be when I grow up? What kind of company do I think I want to work for? Okay, I work for a multinational now. Do I want to work for myself, or do I want to work for a small company? Do I want to work for a startup? And then start actively looking at those, getting to know those people, meeting those kind of people at conferences, scheduling a lunch or coffee to have those conversations. And what ends up happening is when you work your proactive plan, a lot of times you like where you are a lot, So I have a lot of people who are worried, well, if you tell people to go out and build an external network, they'll leave. I actually don't think that that's true. I think that they'll see that the grass isn't necessarily always greener somewhere else. But what you also do in the proactive plan is you're building your plan B. You're getting to know people. Those people end up being the 5 people you call if you ever have to need to. So I think you have to be a little bit intentional in both camps.
Yeah. Well, one thing I always tell everybody is like not to close a door, not close doors in general. But I like what Marianne said. Mm-hmm. When you see that, like a relationship, whatever kind of relationship is not good for you, then I think you should close it. Yes, So networking doesn't mean that you have. And I had a professor that he said that it was very nice. He said, you don't have to work with everybody. You don't have to like everybody. I thought that was really nice to know, because sometimes you say, oh, you have to be nice to everybody. I think you have to be polite to everybody, but you don't have to like or network with people you don't feel like. Yeah.
I think the thing that got maybe the most applause was, I won't say for the podcast, but don't be an a-hole was the thing you said. And Patricia, we were talking afterwards, and I thought you had an interesting thought of, you are so focused on the task and the role, you kind of don't know what's going on around you. You're mentioning, like, there was an accident on the way to work. What are you talking about? This person's being an a-hole. I'm just moving forward. How, and going back to like people think differently, for the people where, I think this is the end I want, like, so you're both leaders, you're both leading teams. So for you, someone might come to you and be like, I'm having a difficulty with this person, and it might be, you may be learning about it for the first time. And then you might have someone come to you and be like, I'm dealing with this very difficult person, and you know that that's a difficult person. How do you talk to your teammates when, you're both maybe kind of seeing it a little differently in how you're experiencing what the team is experiencing?
Okay. Well, although I have a small company, I do have problems like that too.
You could have clients like that as well.
More frequently.
Anyways, no, and of course, I have that. And usually when someone comes to me, I already saw the problem. I already saw what's going on, and I tell the person who was being like, how can I say, like attacked or something, I say, look, don't worry. I see what's going on. Well, but, wait. And then I don't do it, I just go to that person and I come here and we talk and say, hey, what's going on? That works sometimes. Sometimes it doesn't work, because one thing I see that is more important than the person having knowledge, you can train everything, is character. Is character, and I've seen bad character, that people that look like that person was going to be good, but then the character of that person just destroyed everything, and then you really had to, So sometimes you have to just cut it off, just get rid of people. That's all,
Yeah, I guess that's my main answer, is that, we have policies to deal with that, right? And I think, at a certain point, I think as a society, we have to get to a point, or continue to grow to a point where that's just not behavior that's going to get you, promoted, and to be able to stay in your roles. And so I think it then comes down to, for that individual, why is that behavior necessary? And understanding of what's going on in their ecosystem that is causing that. And is there something that between the leader and honestly HR can do to be able to manage that particular situation? And if you can't, then there are policies to deal with that.
Yeah, that might be a nice aspect of a bigger company. You can get HR involved, and maybe Patricia, you don't have that.
I have
you might
an
have
HR.
that hat.
It's quite easier.
No, actually, I do have a company that does all my accounting, because in Brazil, right? Because it's so complicated there, and they have an HR department. So sometimes when there is a question about something that relates to HR, then I ask this lady, to talk to the person. Like, look, why don't you clear up, because the person's not thinking correctly, So it depends on the situation. But
I think what you're pointing to, though, is what is the culture? And so culture is like, how do things get done in our organization or our team or our company? And so, if a culture is such that you can have that behavior and still continue to work there, then that's probably the bigger part of the problem than the individual.
Yeah, and that's when you said a great thing. Like, you were like, when you said that, don't be an a-hole, like, everyone thought of someone. And the person I thought of was just someone who is very good at their work. And because they're actually bringing in good business, they're almost certainly never going to get fired. So managing those like, it can feel very demoralizing in a way when you see someone, you understand why they're in the role and yeah, you feel like there's nothing you can do.
But if the leadership can appreciate that while that individual is very good at what they do, how much are they losing from the individuals that are having to work in that environment?
Exactly.
So 1 + 1 is not equaling 5.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
1 + 1 is kind of equaling -1.
One of the things you said in the talk that I wanted you just to share a little bit more about, because you didn't give it a lot of color, you said history is everything. How do you think about that, like in your day-to-day job? What do you mean by that exactly?
What I mean is that, okay, one of the subjects that I really liked when I was in school was history. I really liked history. And I talk a lot to my husband and about like what's going on right now, and you hear this phrase, history repeats itself, and you see people making mistakes today that were made generations before, and people are not seeing, these people don't know the history. They don't know what happened to this country when this happened. They don't know what this and this. So that's why I think history is very important. Actually, this magazine, The Economist, they have one page on history. That's very important, So when I talk about education, I think the technical background is extremely important, but I think one thing that is lacking in the education today is I think everybody should have a history class and an economics class. Every school, no matter what you're studying, you should have that.
Allie, I feel like you're an expert networker. I'm just thinking, me and my wife, we talk all the time about like making friends as adults, and you kind of get to this point with a person where you almost feel like you have to ask, like, can you be my friend? Like, can we like make this official or whatever that would be? Have you said like to someone like, you are in my top 5? Like, if I get laid off, I'm going to call you.
Yes. And I'm an introvert. So I actually have to work very hard. But there are people that you just connect with. And a friend of mine here was in the audience. I'm like, let's go have lunch. And so that's, and I tell my team, I tell my mentees, I said it here once a month. It should kind of be once a week. You should be, nurturing those relationships because it is about that. And yeah, I have my own board of directors. They know who they are, they know that when I need them, if I have an opportunity, if I have a frustration, if I have a disappointment, they're going to be the people I call. They actually know me really, really well. I also think it's important, like any board of directors, though, you have to cycle through. So there's at a certain point, and similar with career coaches as well, there's maybe they get to know you a little too well, and so they're a friend and they might not tell you the hard truths. So I do also circle people, in and out of that or add more to it, because sometimes I need somebody who doesn't know me so well, because when they know you really well, they're like, this is what she wants me to say. And sometimes I don't need that because I've already told myself that.
Yeah, we only have time for one more question, but you're mentioning something you mentioned in the talk about career coaches and that you are currently working with one, and that's something you would do. Basically, anyone listening to this interview should probably hire a career coach.
I originally thought I was uncoachable because I spend a lot of time in my own head, and I feel like I've asked myself all these questions. And what a coach does is different from a mentor. A mentor is about giving you your experiences and what you would do in that situation. I love to mentor. I'm a terrible coach. I'm too, I will want to tell you what I would do. I don't want to ask you questions to hear what you think. Whereas that's what a coach does. And I found like I ask all these questions in my head. What is a coach going to ask me I haven't already asked myself? I can't tell you the number of aha moments that I've had because they just ask it in a different way, or ask me a question I hadn't thought of before. So no, I think it's incredible. I think I have a Rolodex of them, and I'll pull different ones for different. They're going to be suited to different things. If it's a change, a career change, if it's a new role, if it's a challenging individual you're working with, so different ones will have their different strengths.
Yeah. So for the last question, this is going to come out today, this conversation. So it's Monday at Image, so we're looking ahead to the week. What would you recommend for someone listening to make the most of this time? I feel like networking we know, but like what is something in your experience that you would recommend to do to maximize this time together with this wide group of people?
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think you should focus on something because that you think it's important, that you one subject that you like mostly. Okay, because you're not going to be able to attend all the talks. Okay, so. There will be other opportunities to look at other subjects too. So I think here because this is like a major meeting, I think you should focus first on the subject of your interest. That's what I would say. And then maybe other opportunities, look for newer stuff. I don't know.
I think it's going to depend a lot on what you're here for. And I think if you are somebody who is looking at, what do you want to study for your master's? I think that's going to be a different answer than somebody who wants to get deep knowledge. Yeah. So I think what I would do is I would ask yourself a question like, this is the question I have, and then use this time. I love that focus. Then focus in on getting those answers. Is it, what's the next company I'm going to work for? What technology is going to solve this particular problem? What is the latest and greatest in this, specific area? And then once you have that question, then use the time very well, because you're right, you'll be absolutely overwhelmed and you'll spend all the time sitting at a table just looking at your phone.
Is there anything, I'd just be remiss, is there anything you just really wanted to say in that panel that you were not able to share, that you want to take the chance now just to get it off your chest?
I would actually. One of the things we were talking earlier about, about teams and such, and they also asked about a book. And, something that I feel in my philosophy very well, but is really, really well articulated by the author of Mission Ready, Lindsay Elkins Tanton. There is good news, there's bad news, and there's best news. Best news is bad news received early. And I think if you have, and what's so great about Lindy is that she's a professor at UC Berkeley, but she is also a NASA PI for the Psyche mission. And that mission went through a lot of really challenging. And so the whole book is about that. But I found it so powerful because it's something that within a culture, if you can get to a culture where you have good news and best news, there is no bad news, because best news is bad news gotten early, you have a fantastic culture.
Well, it's nice as three introverts in this room that you have all made careers for yourself. So there is hope out there for everyone. And thanks for a wonderful panel. I know you spent a lot of time preparing for that. And Maria Angela does not mess around. So good for you all. And thanks for talking with me right now.
Thanks for the invite.
Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you for joining me here on Inside Image. The conversations you've heard today capture the energy, ambition, and collaborative spirit that make Image such a vital gathering for our community. Be sure to catch our highlight episodes, social media clips, and post-event recap, extending the best moments far beyond this week. I'm Andrew Gary. Thanks for listening, and here's to the innovations ahead.